Ever wonder what it was like to grow old in the medieval world, a time stretching from roughly 500 to 1500 AD? Did aging mean a life of comfort and respect, or endless struggle and despair? The truth is, your golden years back then depended almost entirely on one thing, whether you were rich or poor. Number 1. Physical comforts, warmth and softness. Imagine growing old in a world before central heating or soft mattresses. For the rich, the chill of aging was softened by layers of luxury, while for the poor, it was a constant, biting reality. Wealthy medieval elders, often residing in sprawling castles or grand manor houses, could command an army of servants to ensure their comfort. Their chambers, while still prone to drafts compared to modern homes, were heated by roaring fires and massive stone fireplaces, meticulously tended by staff. Logs, often abundant from their own estates, burned ceaselessly, warding off the bone-aching cold that permeated stone structures. Tapestries, rich and thick, hung from walls, not just for decoration, but as insulation trapping what little warmth could be coaxed from the hearth. These woven wonders depicted heroic deeds or biblical scenes, but their true value to an aging noble was the barrier they provided against the biting winds that whistled through poorly sealed windows and doors. Beyond the ambient warmth, personal comforts were paramount. An elderly lord or lady would sleep not on a rough straw pallet, but in a large four-poster bed, its frame carved from expensive timbers. This bed would be piled high with mattresses stuffed with down feathers, wool, or even soft animal furs, a luxury unimaginable to the common folk. Layers of linen sheets, woolen blankets, and heavy fur-lined quilts ensured a cocoon of warmth through the longest, coldest nights. Getting out of bed was less of a shock when servants were ready with warm robes, often lined with rabbit or squirrel fur, and slippers to protect tender feet from cold stone floors. Even their undergarments would be made of finer, softer linen or wool, providing an extra layer of protection against the medieval chill. The poor, however, faced a drastically different reality as they aged. Their homes, if they even owned one, were typically small, single-room cottages or huts built from wattle and daub, timber, or mud. These structures offered little protection against the elements. Heating came from a central hearth, often just an open fire pit on the floor, the smoke escaping through a hole in the roof, or sometimes a crude chimney. This smoke, while providing some warmth, also filled the cramped space, irritating aging lungs and eyes. Fuel, usually gathered wood or peat, was a constant struggle to obtain and a precious commodity rarely enough to keep the home truly warm through the night. The elderly poor, already weakened by a lifetime of labor, would shiver through the nights, their bodies less able to generate heat. Their beds were simple, often straw mattresses laid directly on the dirt floor, or sometimes on a raised wooden platform. Straw, while better than nothing, quickly became lumpy, harbored pests, and offered minimal insulation. Covers were rudimentary, perhaps a thin, worn woolen blanket, patched and repatched, or layers of old cloaks. A single, threadbare piece of cloth was often all that separated their aging bodies from the biting cold. As for clothing, the poor wore coarse wool or linen, often undyed and unwashed for long periods. Their garments were tough, designed for durability and hard labor, not for comfort. They offered little in the way of softness against sensitive aging skin. When cold seeped into their bones, there was no warm bath, no soft blanket, no servant to stoke the fire. They simply endured the discomfort compounding the myriad other pains of old age. The contrast was stark. One group found their final years cushioned by luxury and warmth, while the other battled the elements with little more than the thin, worn clothes on their backs and the meager shelter of their humble homes. Number 2. Medical marvels or lack thereof. Doctors' V's, despair. When illness struck an elder in the medieval period, the outcome often hinged on their wealth. For the rich, access to even the rudimentary medical knowledge of the time was a privilege that could prolong life or at least alleviate suffering. Wealthy nobles and merchants could afford the services of a physician, a rare and educated individual who, while perhaps not always effective by modern standards, possessed knowledge of anatomy, herbal remedies, and sometimes even surgical procedures. These doctors, often trained in universities like Bologna or Salerno, would be summoned to the noble's bedside, traveling sometimes for days to offer their diagnosis. They might prescribe complex herbal concoctions, bleeding or purges, all carried out by skilled attendants. While some treatments were misguided, others, like specific herbal remedies for pain or inflammation, offered genuine relief. Beyond the physician, the wealthy had access to a range of supplementary care. Skilled apothecaries would prepare custom medicines from expensive imported spices and herbs. Nurses, often nuns or devout women, could be employed to provide round-the-clock care, ensuring cleanliness, administering medicines, and comforting the ailing elder. The environment itself could be controlled. A quiet room, warm blankets, soft foods prepared specifically for the sick. Spiritual comfort, too, was readily available, with priests summoned to offer last rites or special prayers. For the very wealthy, even a stay at a monastic infirmary, renowned for its care and quietude, was an option, offering a serene environment for healing or peaceful passing. Records speak of powerful lords recovering from serious ailments, their survival often attributed to the continuous care and expensive treatments they received. The poor, by stark contrast, faced an entirely different battle against illness in old age. A common laborer or peasant had no hope of affording a university-trained physician. Their medical care relied on folk remedies passed down through generations, the wisdom of village healers, or, at best, the basic ministrations of a local barber surgeon who dealt more with setting bones or extracting teeth than complex internal ailments. These healers often had practical experience, but lacked the theoretical knowledge that, however flawed, informed the practice of a physician. A common cure might involve a poultice of weeds, a prayer to a saint, or a concoction of dubious efficacy brewed at home. When a severe illness struck, the elderly poor were largely left to their own devices. There were no nurses to tend to them, no special foods to ease digestion, no quiet, clean room for recovery. They lay in their crowded, often unsanitary homes, surrounded by their family, who might be able to offer comfort but little in the way of effective medical treatment. If they lived in a town, they might approach a local charity or a monastery for some basic aid, but extensive care was out of reach. Many simply succumbed to illnesses that a wealthy person might have survived, not due to lack of love from their family, but due to a complete lack of medical resources. Childbirth complications, infected wounds, chronic ailments like arthritis or respiratory issues, all were far more likely to prove fatal for the elderly poor, turning their golden years into a painful decline, often ending in a swift and unassisted death, leaving them with little more than hope and prayer. Number 3. Food for the soul and body. Feasts, viz., famine. The daily meal in medieval old age was a stark indicator of social standing, profoundly impacting health and longevity. For the wealthy elder, food was not merely sustenance. It was a source of pleasure, status, and consistent nourishment. A noble, in their later years, enjoyed a diet rich in variety and abundance. Their tables groaned under the weight of roasted meats like venison, boar, beef, and fowl, often served with rich gravies and spiced sauces. Fresh fish, both from rivers and for coastal dwellers, The sea was a common feature, especially on fasting days. Vegetables and fruits, though less varied than today, were available from their own gardens or estates. Honey and expensive imported sugar sweetened their desserts and drinks. Bread, a staple for all, was made from fine wheat flour for the rich, resulting in a soft white loaf that was easy to chew and digest for aging teeth. Spices, costly and exotic, not only flavored their food, but were also believed to have medicinal properties, aiding digestion and warding off illness. Wine and ale flowed freely, often of high quality, providing both hydration and calories. With a continuous supply of rich calorie-dense foods, the wealthy elder could maintain their strength, fight off illness, and recover more readily from ailments. They were less prone to the chronic deficiencies that plagued the poor. Their meals were often social events served by attentive servants, allowing them to enjoy their food without effort, ensuring they ate well even when their appetites waned. This consistent nutrient-rich diet was a cornerstone of their comparatively robust old age. For the poor, however aging, often meant a descent into increasing hunger and nutritional deficits. Their diet was monotonous and meager, heavily reliant on coarse grains. Their bread, often the bulk of their intake, was made from barley, rye, or oats, sometimes mixed with legumes or even sawdust, to stretch the supply. This dark, hard bread was difficult to chew for those with failing teeth and offered less concentrated nutrition. Meat was a rare luxury, perhaps a bit of salted pork or a scrawny fowl only on special feast days, if at all. For most of the year, protein came from peas, beans, or perhaps a bit of cheese if they were fortunate enough to keep a cow or goat. Fish was only available if they lived near a viable water source and had permission to fish, and even then was often small and infrequent catches. Vegetables were seasonal and limited to what they could grow in their small plots. Cabbage, onions, root, vegetables. Fruits were often wild berries or apples gathered rather than cultivated. The poor had little access to the vitamins and minerals found in a varied diet. Water, often from a communal well or river, was their primary beverage. As their bodies aged, the physical demands of their labor continued, but their caloric and nutrient intake decreased. This led to chronic malnutrition, making them susceptible to illness, sapping their strength, and accelerating the physical decline of old age. A bad harvest could mean starvation, and for the elderly poor, already vulnerable, a single failed crop could spell their end. Their last years were often marked by the gnawing ache of hunger and the slow, inevitable weakening of bodies starved of essential nutrients. Number 4. Homes, sweet homes, or huts, castles, vives, cottages. The physical environment of old age was a colossal divider between the rich and the poor in medieval times. For the wealthy, growing old meant remaining within the relative comfort and security of a grand home, be it a fortified castle, a sprawling manor house, or a substantial town dwelling. These residences, while lacking modern amenities, offered space, privacy, and protection. A noble could retreat to their private chambers, away from the hustle and bustle of the household, enjoying peace and quiet. These rooms often featured soft furnishings, a comfortable bed, and a private latrine, a distinct luxury. The sheer size of these homes meant that an elderly noble could choose to be as active or as secluded as they wished. They might have a private chapel for contemplation, a garden for gentle strolls, or a library filled with precious manuscripts. Beyond the personal quarters, the structure itself provided security. Thick stone walls and guarded gates offered protection from bandits, rival factions, or even just curious onlookers. Servants were on hand to assist with every need, bringing food, helping with dressing, tending to fires, and generally making life easier. An elderly noble, even if frail, could move around their extensive property with the help of attendants or simply remain in their comfortable solar, enjoying the views from a well-placed window. Their large household provided companionship and diversion, with jesters, musicians, and visitors often gracing their halls, preventing isolation. The physical space itself, designed for power and prestige, inadvertently offered a level of comfort and ease to its aging residents that was unimaginable to the vast majority of the population. The poor, however, often faced old age in conditions that exacerbated their physical decline. Their homes were typically small single-room cottages or huts, shared with an entire family, often including multiple generations. Privacy was non-existent. A typical peasant home might be a wattle and daub structure, perhaps 10 by 15 feet, with a thatched roof and a dirt floor. Heat came from an open hearth, filling the air with smoke and soot, irritating aging lungs. Windows were small openings, often unglazed and covered only with shutters or oiled cloth, offering little light or warmth. Hygiene was rudimentary, with no dedicated latrine, meaning bodily waste was often deposited in a communal area or simply outside the door, contributing to disease. For an elderly peasant, this meant a crowded, unsanitary, and often damp existence. With multiple family members, including young children and often livestock sharing the space, peace and quiet were rare commodities. Moving around was difficult, especially for those with arthritis or weakened limbs, as they might have to step over sleeping family members or animal droppings. There was no personal space to retreat to, no private spot for contemplation or rest. The lack of proper heating and insulation meant constant exposure to cold and damp, worsening chronic conditions. As they became frailer, the very structure of their home, designed for sheer survival and efficiency, became a source of discomfort and indignity. There were no servants to help them, no luxuries to ease their pain, only the persistent demands of a hard-scrabble life played out within the confines of a cramped and basic dwelling, a stark contrast to the fortified comfort of a noble's castle. Number 5. Work until you drop or don't. Retirement, vs. relentless toil. The concept of retirement, as we understand it today, was virtually non-existent in the medieval period, yet wealth offered a potent approximation of it. For the rich, reaching old age often meant a shift from active management to oversight and leisure. A wealthy lord or lady, while still technically holding power, could delegate the daily grind of estate management, legal disputes, and social obligations to younger family members, trusted stewards, or capable bailiffs. Their influence remained, but the physical demands lessened considerably. They might spend their days in contemplation, managing household accounts, or engaging in gentle pursuits like reading, embroidery, or listening to music. Some even retired to monastic life, seeking spiritual solace in their final years, supported by their substantial endowments. This meant that even if their bodies began to fail, their minds could remain sharp and their dignity intact. They were not forced to continue strenuous physical labor. Instead, their wealth provided a cushion, allowing them to dictate their own pace of life, to rest when needed, and to avoid the exhausting tasks that had defined their youth. They might attend councils, offer advice to their heirs, or engage in quiet diplomacy, their wisdom valued more than their physical strength. Their economic security was guaranteed by their land, their rents, and their accumulated wealth, ensuring they never had to worry about how their next meal would be procured or where they would sleep. This freedom from physical toil and economic anxiety was perhaps the greatest luxury of old age for the medieval elite, allowing them to enjoy their twilight years with a semblance of peace and often considerable influence. For the poor, however, old age was synonymous with unrelenting labor until the body simply gave out. There was no social safety net, No pension, no concept of ceasing work for good. A peasant, a laborer, or a craftsman continued to work as long as their bodies were physically capable, for their very survival depended on it. As joints stiffened, backs ached, and eyesight failed, they still had to toil in the fields, haul heavy loads, or perform intricate crafts. A farmer with arthritis in their hands still had to sow seeds and harvest crops. A laundress with failing eyesight still had to scrub clothes by hand. The output might decrease, and the work might become agonizingly slow, but the work never stopped. If an elderly poor person became too infirm to work, their situation became dire. They faced a grim choice: reliance on the charity of their family, who often had little to spare themselves, or dependence on the meager goodwill of the local lord or parish. Some might become beggars, wandering from village to village, relying on scraps. Others might be given a small, undesirable plot of land to eke out a bare subsistence, or allowed to live in a corner of their children's crowded home, a burden on already strained resources. The elderly poor were often considered a drain, their contributions diminished, their physical weakness a liability. Their dignity often eroded as they became increasingly dependent, their last years defined by a struggle for survival, a constant reminder of their inability to contribute meaningfully to the physical demands of their agrarian society. The stark reality was that, for the poor, life was work, and work only ceased with death. Number 6. Family ties and inherited security. The role of family in old age was crucial in the medieval world, but the nature of that support differed vastly between the rich and the poor. Rooted in the concept of inheritance and property, for wealthy elders their position within the family structure was often one of continued authority and respect, bolstered by their control over valuable assets. A noble parent or grandparent, even if physically frail, retained significant power through their ownership of land, titles, and wealth. Their children and grandchildren were often highly motivated to care for them, not only out of filial duty, but also because their own future inheritance depended on the elders' goodwill. Disinheriting an heir was a powerful threat, ensuring that sons and daughters remained attentive and respectful. This meant that wealthy elders were surrounded by a robust network of care and attention. Their children, often already managing parts of the family estate, would ensure their parents were well fed, clothed, and housed. If an elderly parent became ill, the best available care would be sought. Grandchildren were raised with the understanding that their elders were sources of wisdom and authority, to be honored and obeyed. The household staff, funded by the family fortune, provided daily comfort and assistance, from personal attendants to cooks and cleaners. Decisions about the future of the family, particularly marriages and alliances, still often ran through the elder, even if a younger generation was taking on day-to-day duties. Their physical presence was a symbol of continuity and power, ensuring their security and comfort until their dying breath. Their legacy was assured, and their descendants would continue to benefit from the foundations they laid. For the poor, family support in old age was driven by necessity and obligation rather than inherited power, and it was often a far more precarious arrangement. In peasant families, children were expected to care for their aging parents, but their capacity to do so was severely limited by their own poverty. There was often little to no property to inherit beyond a small plot of land or some basic tools, which were needed immediately for the next generation's survival. The elder parent often retired by formally handing over their land holding to a son or daughter in exchange for a guaranteed allowance of food, shelter, and clothing for the rest of their lives. This was a common contract known as a karate, or dower, but its success depended entirely on the continued prosperity of the younger generation. If harvests failed, or if the younger family members fell ill or died, the elderly parents were immediately vulnerable. The guaranteed support could dwindle or disappear altogether. They might find themselves living in a corner of their children's crowded hut, increasingly a burden on already meager resources. While love and duty certainly played a role, the economic realities were harsh. An elderly parent who could no longer contribute to labor might be seen as another mouth to feed in a household struggling to survive. Abandonment was rare, but neglect was a grim possibility. Grandchildren, while perhaps offering affection, often had to focus on their own contributions to the household's survival, leaving little time for dedicated elder care. The family's survival was a collective effort, and as an elder's ability to contribute diminished, their value within the harsh economic system of the poor family could unfortunately also decline, leaving their final years fraught with uncertainty and dependence. Number 7. Dignity and respect. The elder statesman vs. the forgotten soul. The way medieval society viewed and treated its aging members varied immensely, based on social standing. For the rich, old age, particularly for men, often brought an elevation of status and respect, a transformation into an elder statesman figure. A long life was seen as a sign of divine favor, wisdom, and experience. Older nobles, bishops, and wealthy merchants were often revered for their accumulated knowledge. Their counsel sought in political matters, legal disputes, and family affairs. Their age symbolized continuity and tradition, valuable attributes in a society deeply rooted in lineage and custom. Even if physically infirm, their intellectual and moral authority remained potent. A wealthy elder might preside over family gatherings. Their every word listened to with deference. They held court, received visitors, and were addressed with formal titles of respect. Their position ensured that their comfort was attended to, their opinions valued, and their presence honored. Funerals were grand affairs, designed to publicly commemorate their life and status, followed by elaborate memorials and prayers for their soul, perpetuating their memory. Their very existence, prolonged by wealth and privilege, served as a testament to their success and influence, allowing them to age with a profound sense of dignity and societal affirmation. They were not merely old, they were venerable. For the poor, however, old age could often strip away dignity, transforming them from productive members of society into, at worst, a forgotten or even resented burden. While respect for elders existed in principle within close-knit communities, the harsh realities of poverty often overshadowed it. An elderly peasant or laborer, whose physical capacity for work had diminished, could no longer contribute meaningfully to the labor that sustained their family or community. Their value in an agrarian society was largely tied to their physical output, and once that was gone, their standing could plummet. They might be seen as an extra mouth to feed a drain on meager resources, rather than a fount of wisdom. While their life experience was certainly valuable, the immediate needs of survival often took precedence over philosophical discussions. Their clothing was likely worn, their appearance often disheveled from a lifetime of hard labor and poor hygiene. They were less likely to be invited to important gatherings or have their opinions formally sought out. When they died, their funeral was likely simple, their grave unmarked, their passing noted only by their immediate family and close neighbors. There were no grand eulogies, no lasting monuments. The elderly poor often faded from memory quickly, their dignity eroded by the relentless struggle for survival and the harsh judgment of a society that valued tangible contribution over inherent worth. Their old age often became a struggle for basic survival, leaving little room for the recognition and veneration afforded to their wealthy counterparts. Number 8. Getting around. Carriages vs. crippling journeys. Mobility in old age was a profound differentiator between the rich and the poor in medieval times, shaping their engagement with the world. For the wealthy, declining physical ability was largely mitigated by the availability of various forms of transport and personal assistance. A powerful noble or rich merchant, even if afflicted by gout, arthritis, or general frailty, could still travel relatively comfortably. They possessed carriages, often rudimentary by modern standards, but immensely superior to walking, drawn by horses and driven by skilled coachmen. These carriages, sometimes enclosed and fitted with rudimentary suspensions, allowed them to traverse long distances for business, social calls, or religious pilgrimages without enduring the physical toll of walking. Within their vast estates, elderly nobles had access to sedan chairs or litters, carried by strong servants, allowing them to move between chambers, across courtyards, or even into gardens without exertion. Horses, specifically bred for gentle temperaments, might be ridden by those still able, often with a servant at their side. Servants were always on hand to assist with walking, providing a steady arm, helping with stairs, or carrying necessary items. This meant that a wealthy elder could maintain a degree of social interaction, continue to visit churches, attend banquets, or even conduct business long after their physical strength would have confined a poorer person to their home. Their world remained expansive, accessible, and dignified, despite their physical limitations, all thanks to their ability to command labor and resources. For the poor, the onset of old age and its associated physical decline meant a rapidly shrinking world, often confined to the immediate vicinity of their homes. Their primary mode of transport was their own 2 feet. As arthritis stiffened joints, as eyesight dimmed, and as general strength waned, even short journeys became agonizing ordeals. A trip to the nearest market town, perhaps a few miles away, which had once been a common occurrence, could become an impossible feat. The uneven, muddy, and stone-strewn roads were treacherous for unsteady legs. There were no carriages to whisk them away, no servants to carry them. If they lived in the countryside, they might be effectively cut off from the wider world, unable to attend church regularly, visit distant family, or participate in communal events. Their social circle contracted to their immediate household and nearest neighbors. Mobility within their own small home was also a challenge, navigating uneven dirt floors or steep, narrow stairs. As their bodies failed, their ability to gather firewood, fetch water, or tend a small garden plot became severely limited, deepening their dependence on others. The physical pain of movement, coupled with the sheer effort required, meant that the elderly poor often became prisoners in their own homes, their world shrinking day by day until it encompassed little more than the few square feet they could manage to hobble. A cobble across a day, and their last years marked by dwindling freedom, Number 9. Spiritual peace or panic. Salvation vs. suffering. In the medieval world, the afterlife was not a matter of philosophical debate, but a terrifying reality, and one's preparation for it, particularly in old age, was deeply influenced by wealth. For the rich, approaching death was often accompanied by extensive spiritual comfort, purchased through lavish donations and guaranteed access to religious services. Wealthy elders could afford to commission private chapels within their castles or manor houses, ensuring constant access to a priest for confession, communion, and spiritual guidance. They could employ personal chaplains whose sole duty was to attend to their spiritual needs, offering daily prayers and reading from religious texts. The ability to make large endowments to monasteries, churches, or convents was a powerful tool for spiritual peace. These donations, often in land or money, secured perpetual prayers for their souls after death, believed to shorten their time in purgatory. They could arrange for numerous masses to be said on their behalf, pay for elaborate funeral rites, and commission beautiful tombs or effigies that served as a constant reminder for the living to pray for their departed soul. Dying in a monastic infirmary, a quiet and holy place, was also an option for the extremely pious and wealthy. Their wealth allowed them to buy not just comfort in this life, but a perceived advantage in the next, easing their fears of damnation in purgatory and offering a profound sense of spiritual security as they faced their end. For the poor, however, spiritual comfort in old age was often a more precarious and terrifying prospect, haunted by the very real fear of eternal suffering with little means to mitigate it. Access to sacraments, while theoretically universal, was often difficult. Village priests might be overburdened, absent, or demand small fees that an impoverished elder could not afford. Receiving last rites crucial for salvation could be a desperate struggle, especially in remote areas or during times of plague, when priests were scarce. There was no personal confessor available around the clock. The poor could offer little in the way of donations for prayers, masses, or indulgences. Their spiritual support largely came from communal worship and personal faith, but the tangible good works that could alleviate purgatory as taught by the Church were beyond their means. They could not commission elaborate funeral services or perpetual prayers. Their graves were often unmarked, leaving no physical reminder for future generations to pray for their souls. The fear of dying, unshriven, of facing the torments of purgatory or even damnation, without the spiritual protections afforded to the rich, was a heavy burden. For the elderly poor, their final years were often spent grappling, not just with physical suffering, but with profound spiritual anxiety, lacking the means to ease their path to the afterlife and leaving them to face death with a raw and unmitigated fear of the unknown